The scribes and Pharisees brought a woman along who had been caught committing adultery. And making her stand there in the middle, they said to Jesus, "Master, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. And in the law, Moses ordered us to stone women of this kind. What have you got to say?" They asked him this as a test, looking for an accusation to use against him. All right, a little backtracking. So Rome took over the Jews, allowed the Jews to have their own laws, but they would not allow the Jews to be able to have the power of life and death. Capital punishment. That was an authority that belonged only to Rome. Which is why on Good Friday, the chief priests and scribes and Pharisees bring Jesus to Pontius Pilate to have him crucified. They would have loved to kill him themselves, but if they killed Jesus themselves, if they ordered that kind of execution, Rome would have just killed anybody involved, and they didn't want that to happen. And this was a real problem for the Jews because there were some things in their customs and their law that required death. Adultery was one of those things. But they can't kill people because they're now servants to Rome, and it was a real theological problem for the Jews. So they thought of this trap. They bring this woman forward, throw her in front of Jesus and say, "Well, the law says we should stone women of this kind. What about you?" And he figures he's going to say one of two things. Either Jesus is going to say, "Oh, no, we shouldn't be hurting people. That's bad." And they'll be able to turn to the people and say, "Some Messiah. He's breaking the law of God. He acts so righteous and all these other things. You know, he's not your Messiah." And the people would stop believing in him and walk away. Or Jesus would say, "You must follow the law. Kill her." At which the crowd would, and the Pharisees run over and say, "You're not going to believe who just ordered the execution. It's the guy in the beard and sandals. The other, no, that one. And they figured they had this. This was like the greatest trap ever. And they were so happy. But here's what happens. Whenever you offer God option A or B, he always goes with C, none of the above. So what would Jesus do? You know, what do you have to say? They asked him this as a test, and Jesus bent down and started writing on the ground with his finger. So what do you have to say, Jesus? Just try, did you expect that? I did not expect that. So after a while, they persisted with their question. Jesus, And Jesus straightened up and he said, "Let the one among you who has no sin be the first to throw the stone." And then it says he went back down and wrote on the ground with his finger. And one by one, beginning with the eldest, they went away until the last one had gone and Jesus was left alone with the woman. Now, nobody knows what Jesus was writing on the ground, and it's really not important. Some people say, well, maybe it was their sins, maybe it was something only Jesus would know. That's what I like to think. I like to think he's writing something like, Vader is Luke's father or something like that. The solar system, kind of drawing things around. E equals MC squared. But it's not important because what Jesus was actually trying to do by writing on the ground is he was trying to pull attention away from this woman to him. Suddenly, everybody who has a rock and is aiming it at this woman is going, what's he doing? And let's talk about the woman for a second, because sometimes I think she's forgotten in the story. If you listen to the Pharisees' words, it's pretty nasty. It's not, "Master, we found someone who we know commits adultery," or, she's that kind of woman, or other stuff. No, actually. "Master, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery." Which means they followed her, they knew the kind of woman she was, they waited for her, and then they jumped in and grabbed her. You'll notice the man is nowhere to be found. They just wanted to grab the woman, and they dragged her. Maybe she's just covered in a sheet. They dragged her screaming into the temple. I mean, it would almost be like, and not that any of you would do this because you're good Catholic people, but imagine you're on a date with your boyfriend or girlfriend, and you're parked in a car overlooking the water, and maybe you're doing something in the car you shouldn't be, and suddenly there's a knock on the window, and you look up and it's your parish priest. He throws open the door and grabs you half naked, pulls you out of the car, and drags you all the way to the church where the Mass is being celebrated with the bishop, throws you down in front of the altar, your family is all sitting in the front row, and you want to die. Add to because she knew the law. People are starting to pick up rocks. A mob is starting to form. And they want her dead. And she's thinking to herself, I have sinned, I'm going to hell, I'm going to die. And her whole life is hanging on the words of a man she's never met, but a man she knows to be righteous. And of course a righteous man would condemn me. Of course a righteous man would say, throw the stones. Of course a righteous man would say, kill her. Because isn't that what the righteous say? And so she huddles herself in a ball, sobbing, covering herself with a sheet, shaking, praying to God, please, if you care anything about me, let the first rock knock me unconscious so I don't have to be alive as I feel all of my bones crushed as I slowly die. And maybe she was so caught in this emotion and these tears and these sobs that she didn't even hear the people walk away. Didn't even know what was going on around her until finally Jesus said to her, woman, where are they? Has anyone condemned you? And for the first time she looks up. And she looks around. And where all the men were standing, there's just rocks on the ground. And in her shock and surprise, she looks back at Jesus and says, no one, sir. And Jesus looks at her and he says, neither do I. Neither do I condemn you. Go now and sin no more. And I shall be